Welcome to the Meditation Matters podcast, brought to you by EcoWellCo, where we explore and use wellness practices to live well on purpose. Join us today as we feature Lilly, a yogi and international yoga instructor who has created the Wild Yoga Tribe, an international platform connecting and featuring yogis from all over the world in one place. Listen as we discuss various wellness tools that not only help to calm the body and clear the mind, but also create space to hear our own inner voice, to recognize and embrace a new calling, to receive an answer to a lifelong question, or to simply just know what next step to take on our life journey. Let's dive in. Hi, Lilly. Thank you so much for being on the Meditation Matters podcast. I'm super stoked to have you here. And if you wouldn't mind taking a moment for our listeners to tell us who you are, more about yourself, and how you got into the yoga space with your Wild Yoga Tribe.
Thank you so much, Naya. I appreciate it. So my name is Lilly Duenas, and I'm the founder of the Wild Yoga Tribe and host of the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. So each week on my podcast, I interview one yoga teacher from a different country around the world. So far, 80 yoga teachers, 80 countries, 80 episodes. So I love that. And then the Wild Yoga Tribe is just like this space for anyone who's interested and curious about meditation, yoga, health, wellness, and spirituality, anything like that, to come together and have conversations, collaborations, and connections. So I love my work. I love my people. And any of your listeners are welcome to be part of the tribe. It is not a scary thing. It is just joining on social media, hopping into the DMs, or hopping into listening to the episode, reaching out to a past guest, or if you're planning a trip, like Naya's in Colombia right now. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing that with her listeners, where she's at. But I have a yoga teacher there to recommend for her. And I think that's so fun.
Yeah, that is fun. So actually curious, so what got you into wanting to have this international platform of like pretty much connecting yogas from all over or yogis from all over the world? Like, how did this start?
Yeah. So I got into yoga when I was 16. So I've been practicing for over half my life. But after I graduated college, I was working in marketing management for 7 years, and I just felt so burned out. And that was pre this phase. So if your listeners are like Gen Z and Gen X are like, oh, wait, I've always known that term existed. Well, we didn't, this was
Right.
a new thing, but I just felt very unfulfilled. And so I spent a year in Shavasana, like doing a lot of deep, deep work, like trying to really listen to my inner voice. Like, what am I supposed to do? How am
Exactly.
I supposed to give? Like, what's the next step for me in this life? And when the voice came in me and I could hear the voice and it was so clear to become a yoga teacher and help other people on their path of health and wellness, I knew I wanted to go to the root. So I went to Kathmandu, and then in a couple days of being in part of that training, I just knew I'm supposed to keep learning. I'm supposed to keep teaching and growing and being in the space. And it was just amazing. But part of that realization also was that I need to keep traveling. I need to keep learning from teachers and masters and monks and gurus, like all along the way. But I also was falling in love with this community of yoga teachers from everywhere. My best friend in the program was from Egypt. My acro yoga partner was from Spain. The guy across from me, Denmark. The woman next to me, France. Like and I said, this is my people. This is my space. Like, this is where transformation happens, when you're in this beautiful container where it's fluid, it's flexible, and there's people. And so I know yoga teachers are all over YouTube or all over the internet or all over social media. Yoga with Lilly, yoga with Emily, yoga with Sarah.
Yeah.
And I knew that was not me. Like, my gift to the world and how I feel most alive is when I'm connecting and in community with others. So that's why I made it the Wild Yoga Tribe. And I know the word tribe is a little polarizing right now. So, like, dear listeners, please give me grace with this term if tribe feels uncomfortable for you, and know that my intention is always to be this global community of people from every walk of life and every culture. And tribe felt like it really resonated for me when I chose that word 6-7 years ago. So hope there's a little grace in that.
It's interested in this space to come and join. We love that. So thank you for creating the Wild Yoga Tribe and for really committing yourself and your journey to this. So like doing the deep work that you needed to do in order to be able to give yourself the space to even hear what the next step is. And I think that's like a really, really big thing. Even in my own personal journey, it's about like giving myself the space, the silence enough to hear, to figure out, okay, I don't want to force myself into something that I think should go, or into a door, but allowing that door to come to me and allowing me to say, okay, I know the next action step to take. So that's beautiful that you did that.
Yes. And I smile because you said, allow the door to come to you, not like grab and grasp or push and pull, because it's often that we feel like we are pulling something really strongly to us. And for some reason it's not coming. And I usually think that means it's not meant for you. Or if you're resisting something, it's only going to resist you twice as hard.
Yeah.
So I think that was such a beautiful thing for you to bring up, is pulling and the pushing, and just something for, I think, our listeners to think about, like, what are you pulling towards you, and are you allowing it to unfold? Because it could be infinitely more beautiful or right for you if you just allow a little bit of that breath and space for it to co-create with you.
Yes,
right?
Yes, 100%. So for the listeners that may not be fully aware of what you meant when you said that you took a year in Shavasana, do you mind like breaking that down a little bit more so that we can have like a more clear understanding of like your journey to really becoming a yoga instructor?
Yeah. So what I meant with a year in Shavasana is that I was taking yoga classes almost every morning at a studio near me when I was living in Iowa City. And that's in the state of Iowa. Surprise, surprise, Iowa City's in Iowa. But every morning, and I would take extra time in Shavasana. The teacher would leave the room. She would always give us 5 minutes, was just so much gratitude for that, of course, because a lot of teachers can sometimes feel the pressure to make it a 2-minute thing and pop up, and then someone's coming in with a cleaning mop and it's like, oh wow, that was fast. But I took extra time every day in Shavasana to be still, be quiet, and be intentional. Like, my question for myself was, what am I supposed to do with my one wild and precious life, to quote Mary Oliver? But those were really those words that were resonating. What am I supposed to do with this one wild and precious life? And I would hear nothing, it'd just be silence, or my mind would drift and I pull it back. Shavasana, you're relaxing in this corpse pose. That's the translation of Shavasana, is corpse pose. So you're just lying with your eyes closed, very restful. It's similar to maybe what a shape you'd make in bed, just a relaxing on your mat, eyes closed, after an asana practice. So after all of this heat and energy has moved through you. So you're in this state of a little bit more calm, a little bit more mental quiet and energetic quiet as you're absorbing the benefits. But with that question and the intentionality of what am I supposed to do, I was just listening. I was just saying, okay, I'm going to trust this inner wisdom. And I did a lot of meditation work as well, trying to find and meet and spend time with my inner wisdom. Because I think it's so important when you can visualize your inner fear, your inner child, your inner dark shadow self. There's all these elements and aspects that are truly who you are, one element of yourself. And finding that wise self, that inner self, that deep, 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 like divine, cosmic, ultimate, knowing, connected, intuitive, like that self exists in you and every one of our listeners. And just trying to listen. And it took a full year of being patient and showing up and allowing that voice to come organically. It wasn't me calling. I wanted to find that voice. I wanted it to tell me something and me act on it. But I knew if I forced it, it wouldn't be right. And it wouldn't be the right step for me to go forward.
I think it's really great that you also bring up the time frame that it took for you to really go through this, because I think sometimes, especially when we're talking about the spiritual space and like unpacking, we're like, oh, okay, if I do this one yoga class or I sit for this one meditation, I'm going to be cool after this, right? And then that expectation, if it's not met, which a lot of times is not usually met, it can be disheartening and perhaps discourage people from going down this path that can be quite difficult to go down, this path of self-questioning and self-discovery. It's like you're really going through all the things that you've ever felt to be real, to be true, things that you were told and taught, whether that be family, school, society. Like, you're literally unpacking the entire self. And then, as you mentioned, you're going deep, deep, deep to then also join in union with the child self of you that still lives there. And then even deeper to when you said like that intuitive universal voice, the word ancient came up to me. It's like that all, everything, always been here, always will be here voice, energy, that you're really allowing yourself through that space of consistently showing up to quiet the mind, to quiet the body, to really begin to hear that wisdom, to pull through and say, hey, look, I see that you think that this is it over here, but I'm actually here to hold your hand and divert you to the other path. And the other path may seem unknown. It may seem scary. It may cause you to experience some suffering because you may have to shed some old layers. But this is the path that I'm going to hold your hand through the whole time. So I think it's incredible that you talk about your 1 year journey of really digging deep, because the 1 year can sound like a lot of like
Long
emotional
time.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like my journey is actually it took a long time for me as well, and I argue that it continues to unfold. Like, I continue to learn to trust myself even more and more and more and more and more. It's just incredible of a space when you really allow yourself to really tap into that expansive spaciousness and quietness, or almost like nothingness that is always there, that allows for everything to come through that's meant to. So that's how
Yeah,
you
and how often do we get to be in that space with the pace of our lives and the
yes.
constant stimulation of the cell phone and the devices? I
Everything.
mean, it's ping, 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 buzz, buzz, zoom, zoom, beep, beep, like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness,
Mm-hmm.
constant. And so, where is this space now and this time to be quiet and
Yeah.
silent and to have a container
Yeah.
where we can actually listen to our emotions or listen to our mind or our thoughts?
Yeah.
I was reading that this mom, Glennon Doyle, she's a writer, she's wonderful, but her kids are always on their devices, and then she heard her kids chatting in the morning, like, what happens when I shower? Like, what's going on? I have like the best ideas ever. Like, just things are clicking. I don't get it. What's the magic of the shower? How could the shower? And the mom, Glennon Doyle, just was like, honeys, that's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is thinking. And to have to explain to a child not what a floppy disk is,
Mm-hmm.
not what a DVD is, but to explain to a child what thinking is.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. 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 Because when we're constantly being overstimulated, we're not really given the chance to think. I mean, sure, you may have a reaction to something you saw,
Yeah.
but in terms of you being able to conjure thoughts that are not influenced by your external environment, that's the difference. Right. And in my experience with meditation and yoga and all these other spaces that allow me to create space and time to not be overstimulated by external, or just stimulated by external noise or whatever, I am actually like, wow, what a thought I just had, or what an idea that just came. Wow, I finally figured out how to solve that thing that forever felt like I couldn't figure out how to solve it. And then in retrospect, I'm like, oh, perhaps I couldn't figure out how to solve it because I was always looking outside for the answer. But when I gave myself the opportunity to just sit in meditation for 10 minutes or do a 25-minute yoga session, I'm like, whoa, okay, I think I finally hear it. So it's like that remembrance. And this is why I really love these tools, these practices, and these lifestyles. Really, it's what these are, because they allow you to remember to return to the self.
They do. And I love how you said it's a remembrance. Yes. And as you also said, you have to get quiet enough to hear the answer inside of you.
Yeah.
Because that was the biggest lesson of my first Vipassana, was that I am the cause and the solutions to all of my problems.
Mm-hmm.
And every answer I seek is already inside.
Yeah.
You just have to be quiet enough and open enough, because I think we really can resist the truth. If the truth is you need to get a divorce, you're in an unhealthy relationship, whoa, you might have a lot of resistance, because that's going to upend your entire life. Yes. Or you're called to be in the medical field, but right now you're working in finance. Whoa, I would resist that too, because that's a huge financial change, an education change, a lifestyle change. I hear you, I know it, and I empathize, and my heart is with you, but it's that resisting where we find ourselves in anxiety, insomnia, depression, and not living in alignment with our gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. That creates a great segue, because I wanted to ask you about what have been some of your main approaches to dealing with emotional overload, right? And some of these scenarios you just listed could be examples that would lead to emotional overload. So how have you navigated within yourself? And also, when you're helping others navigate through this experience, what are your recommendations generally?
Yeah. Let's just be real too. Like, I'm taking a big breath and my hands are on my heart. Like emotional overload is so real.
Yes.
And it happens to me weekly, like I feel this swell, maybe daily, a
Yeah.
swell of just, I am so far behind. I have too many things to do. I'm back to back to back with things. I feel that. I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own business. I just moved back to the US. And if our dear listeners are in the US, the pace of the US, and how living in Bali or living somewhere is just so different and beautiful. But by re-entering this space, I'm refacing a lot of those daily and weekly overwhelms and all these expectations of others, which for me, I think I handle a little bit better than the overwhelm of just the self, the self and this to-do list. So I'm with your listeners. I empathize. I have some tools. I have some techniques. I have come a long way in my journey, but I am not perfect. And I do face these things. And I think that is a product of just how our society functions. Being in that state of overwhelm, that's really great for society because that means that you are producing things.
Yeah.
If you're overwhelmed, you're doing. You're not being, you're doing. And if you're doing, then you're creating, and that means you're contributing. Then if you're overwhelmed, you're also very likely going to buy things. You're going to make impulse decisions. You're going to seek to soothe yourself in some of the easiest ways you can, which is food. Oh man, instant dopamine, instant sugar rush. You're going to want alcohol at night to get you down, coffee in the morning to get you up. You're going to want to go out and eat out because you don't have time to cook. Like, it's so good for society for you to be overwhelmed. And if you don't feel enough, that iPhone might make your life feel better, or that new purse, or that whatever it is. So I also want your listeners to know, like, I'm with you, and society is working a little bit against you in this way. Because if you are a calm, at ease, comfortable, content being who's like, I'm good, everything's good. Yeah, I work. Yeah, I have a job. Yeah, but I'm fine. You're probably not going to be needing to buy a ton of things or create a ton of, push. So anyway, I think your listeners and Nayo, I think we're on the same page here. But in terms of what I do and how I help others, is I do my best just to meet you where you are. Do you have an hour a day? Do you have 5 hours a day? Do you have 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Where are you? And how can we tap into what little space you can create to re-deregulate your nervous system, to get you back into a state of rest and digest, to get you back into your parasympathetic. Our nervous system is amazing.
Yeah, sure is.
It is amazing. Incredible. And it's supposed to naturally swing between parasympathetic and sympathetic, between being active, awake, alert, to rest and digest. And science says that actually that swinging should happen every 88 minutes to 4 hours. So interesting, right? The science has kind of said that's the zone, but we are locked into that a lot more than 88 minutes to 4 hours, I mean, it would be wonderful. You work 4 hours in the morning. We'll say you're on an 8-hour workday, and you take a 1 hour lunch, really rest, then take another 4 hours to be active, alert, and then you're done. And then you decompress. Then you go back to these opportunistic immune functions like digestion and memory consolidation and your immune functions. These are beautiful things that can only occur when your stress response isn't active. Your memory will not function as well if you're stressed constantly. Your digestive system won't either. It'll be harder to process your food, get the nutrients you need. Your tissues are going to disintegrate. And by being stressed, by being overwhelmed, it's your adrenal glands, they're pumping, and they're essentially, science says, giving you about 3 cups of coffee on an IV drip during your day. So not only maybe do you have 2 cups in the morning, but your body is giving you 3.
Wow, that is a lot. That's crazy.
Yeah. So these little practices, like there's some things you can do with, like, somatically with your body. There's some meditation. I have on Insight Timer, totally free. I got a 3-minute SOS meditation, got longer ones, whatever you need to just tap in, meditate for a few minutes. Or I love the practice of coming back to the bell. It's a Thich Nhat Hanh practice, and the app is called Plum Village, totally free. You can set a timer, and it's very, very smart timer. You can set it to go off once an hour, once every half hour, once every 2 hours, from 11 to 2, from 11, there's all of these settings. So the bell will definitely not ring when you don't want it to. But when you change your settings to how you want this bell to ring on what schedule, we'll just say it's once an hour from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We'll just say once an hour, this gorgeous little gong bell, just a peaceful bong,
very nice,
will come out of your phone. And that is your signal to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. No matter where you are or what you're in the middle of an email, in the middle of something, it's like, no, that is your time to come back to the bell, come back to your body, come back to your breath, and pause. And I love that practice because all you need is essentially 30 seconds. And if you can set that once an hour, beautiful. Once every half hour, beautiful. Choices are yours on the app, which is great.
That's beautiful.
Great practice. And also listening to your body is a great practice. What are you feeling? Is it your fight? Is it your flight? Is it your freeze? Is it your shoulders? Is it your jaw? Like, just the practice of yoga, I think, really teaches you to observe your muscles and your body. So you'll notice more how you're sitting. You'll notice more when things feel off. It's just a beautiful gift that comes with being more mindful of your movements, as well as this gift of proprioception, awareness of your body and space, which is something that you're naturally born with, most of us, but you can develop that and hone that like a muscle. It's beautiful. And then somatically speaking, if you're, let's say, getting really, really into the fight mode, Nayo, like, oh my gosh, you're like, I just want to just push against a wall. Oh my goodness. Like, push physically as hard as you can against a wall. Big breaths, like forceful breaths out, push.
Really letting it out.
You'll be amazed that this mammal body of yours needs to let go of that tension. And you don't need to punch a pillow. Go for it, though. That's another way. But I find the wall push to be really cathartic.
That's amazing. I actually haven't tried that before. So next time I want to just scream and punch something, I will just push against the wall.
Push that wall real good. Yes.
Yes. And I think that's another thing to remember too, even like what you said before you started giving this explanation, is that like, you're not perfect in this space, right? So like, I know sometimes, especially sometimes when folks are in the beginning of this spiritual transformation, this journey, they're like, oh, I feel angry, I feel sad. I'm not supposed to be feeling these things, right? Like, these are the low vibe things. And I'm here to say that's just not true. These are things that are part of the human experience. And like all the tools that you just mentioned, like pushing against the wall and the somatic process, returning to the bell, these are all ways to help you navigate through these emotions that come. They come and go, they come and go. And one of my favorite part about these tools, about these practices, is that as you continue to practice them, and as life continues to happen, like, which it will, emotions will continue to come, the way that you handle them, the way that you manage them, the way that you respond and perceive and understand them shifts. It just continues to shift. And so perhaps instead of wanting to immediately like blow up, you're beginning to realize that you're blowing up a little bit less. It doesn't mean that you're not angry. It just means that you're beginning to shift your relationship with anger and how you navigate your anger around the situation. And that's definitely been a testament to my own journey, because like years ago when I was younger, I used to have a lot of anger, but I wouldn't really speak about it. So I was like very silent and had a lot of built up emotions. And then eventually I would like blow up and explode. And so it definitely got to a point in time, especially as I started practicing meditation more and just getting more into the wellness and energy wellness and spiritual wellness and healing spaces, that I was like, wait a minute, like, I don't have to blow up like this, do I? What are the ways to learn not to blow up like this? And so with time and practice and dedication to it, it's like, okay, like I can feel when the emotion rises. It has like its own little special little feeling.
Is there?
But I'm like, okay, you're present. I feel you. Okay. So let's do what we do. Let's take a deep breath and then acknowledge, okay, why might I be super angry right now? Is this something that I should probably address at this moment? And that the reason why I choose like addressing this moment is because I spent so many years of not addressing things, that my perfect tool for that is, okay, reflection. What's kind of making me angry? Do I need to address it right now? Can I address it in a calm tone? Ish.
Ish. Yeah.
Ish. Again, I'm not perfect here, but ish. And then we just go from there and we see like, does it need to be addressed? Is it more of an internal thing? Am I projecting? Then you have all these other questions that you can go down, but definitely incredible practices that you recommended. Thank you so much for those.
And Nio, I feel like I'm connecting with you so naturally. I have like 1,000 things I want to say in response. Like this is such a beautiful conversation and space. So thank you so much again for this. But what I like, oh my gosh, I have a million directions. But I really do feel that the emotional awareness is so key and such a gift of meditation and yoga, such a gift. And when we are in that state of disruption, like, what do you grab for? Is it a snap? Is it a soda? Is it sugar? Is it a distraction, a shopping? Like, what habit are you reaching for? And that was an amazing awareness tool I got through Vipassana as well. But anger is usually the easiest thing to reach for, I think. And so through this tool as well, or this practice, I think you learn, am I angry or am I actually ashamed? Or am I scared? Because I often find that my anger is a fear of like rejection or a fear of inadequacy or a mental judgment. It's like going a little deeper too is also a beautiful gift of the practice.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a really incredible thing to note, because sometimes, geez, I can't remember the quote right now. Maybe as I'm going to in the future, I'll be able to remember the quote, but it's about how when you think that you're angry and you realize that really perhaps you're just very sad about something. And I think, like you said, a lot of times it's easy to grab for anger. But when we give ourselves that opportunity to sit, to reflect, to create space, to think clearly, we're like, wow, okay, anger was like the layered response, but deeper down, there's like a deeper wound there. And so like, I'm actually really sad about something or whatever it is. And like, that's, again, the importance of this space.
Yes, super. And I love getting into it with you. And I think that I hope your listeners also are hearing just how real we are. Like, yes, I'm an international yoga teacher and I have this, beautiful community. And yes, Nayo has this beautiful podcast and is serving her community in beautiful ways. But like, yeah, we keep saying we're not perfect. We're totally with you. And I would like to reiterate that again in a different way too, that I met a monk in a monastery when I was doing a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and he was giving a Dharma talk. And this was in Dharamsala in India, right outside of the Dalai Lama's ashram. And so, or Dalai Lama's monastery. So I was at this monastery, and this monk, he was maybe, we'll say 50 years old. And he had come to the monastery, we'll say when he's 5, 6, 7. So he'd been meditating very regularly, maybe 4 to 10 hours a day, for decades.
His life.
And he still said it still is a struggle for him to spend a full hour in complete focus on his breath. He's like, my mind still wanders. And that's true. It's the human's nature of our brain. It's how it works. And when you're sitting there and you're struggling even for 5 minutes, you're not alone. You are not doing it wrong.
Exactly.
You showed up. Your intention is to be present. And there's no good or bad meditation.
Yeah.
It's just you showed up, you did it. I love that. There's no good or bad. There's only how regular you practice. I practice regularly. That was something one of my teachers in India always said. Never good, never bad, just how regular.
I mean, I think that also, that's like true for so many things, right? So it's like, for example, if you're trying to get into, let's just say, working out, powerlifting or whatever, you're just trying to be in the gym all the time. Sure, there is techniques to make sure you don't hurt your body, but you don't figure those techniques out to make sure you're safe with your body unless you keep going, you keep learning, you keep trying your hand at it. Same thing with cooking, same thing with any skill. If you want to be a data scientist, you might be bad at it at first, but with time, you learn, you get better. And it's that consistency, is that showing up for yourself, showing up on your mat, showing up in your courses, showing up however it is. Like even on the days when you don't want to, because even for myself, there are some days I'm like, not feeling it today. But then there's something in me that's like, I know you're not feeling it, Io, but this is the perfect time for you to go ahead and get on your mat. When you're not feeling it is a time when you definitely want to get on your mat. When you're not feeling it is a time that you definitely want to still go to the gym. Of course, always listening to your body. If there's ever pain, aches, anything that could be distressful, but like you always want to see like, I don't want to do this. It's like, okay, but
yes.
this would probably be really good if I still did it anyway.
Yep. And the two things I want to add to that too is I also heard a yoga teacher say that the only promise he makes to himself in those days where he doesn't want to do it is he will roll out his mat and he will stand on it. And that's his promise. That's as far as he'll get. If he stands on his mat barefoot, with his mat out, if that's all he can do, that's all he does. It's great because once you actually show up and you're ready, you're like, okay, I could do a sun salutation. Okay, I could flow. My hips are a little sore. You can get into it. Yeah. And then also I love too that there's so many tools and techniques. Manayo and I have just been speaking about yoga and meditation. There's also pranayama. There's mantra chanting. There's amazing things. So some days I just can't do a seated meditation. I'm just not vibing with that. So I'll sit down and do a 20-minute mantra chant. Great. That it is a meditation, but it's not a silent one. And I don't pressure myself. I don't say it has to exist in this exact way in this perfect box. No. And yoga doesn't have to be a vinyasa practice if that's what you're used to. It can be 5 minutes in reclined butterfly. Yeah. Be your practice.
That's no pressure. Practice. Even for the release of the hips too. Oh man.
Who doesn't have tight hips these days, right?
We could do a whole different episode just on tight hips and the deeper meaning behind the tight hips.
I am with you. Sign me up, Niall. I will do that episode. I'm here.
Oh my God, that's wonderful. So the question that I have for you and with your international platform of like connecting people to so many different yoga instructors around the world is like, what are some of the things that your platform and your action of doing this, what have you learned about like community, about curiosity, and just about leading through a heart-centered approach while you've been building this international platform?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Beautiful question. So I think always doing everything from a heart-centered approach as much as I can, like that just feels like my energy signature is just like, that's where I lead. And like last night I was teaching a yin yoga class and it was focusing on the heart chakra. And it's like, that's my space. Like that's my space. And it was amazing. Just like the impact seeing, students who were crying or had to stay after and talk. And, just like a lot of energy was moving. And I think having space for that, creating space for that, and connecting from that heart to heart level, like that's where I'm trying to go. That's what I'm trying to get at, because a lot of these yoga teachers I'm spotlighting and I'm interviewing and I'm engaging with, English is not their first language. True. And they often are feeling really nervous or anxious or like, I have never done anything like this. I've never been interviewed. I'm in this tiny town and this tiny place and a country no one ever seems to talk about, like for example, Azerbaijan or the Solomon Islands, like things you're not really thinking about these spots. And I don't mean to call out those yoga teachers. I have not actually interviewed anyone, even from the Solomon Islands. I am bothering someone nonstop on WhatsApp, but I'm not calling them out specifically, but I'm just saying that there's small countries we're not thinking about. And to have this attention and to have this intention to shine a light on them and what they're doing in their journey, they're often like, but why me? Or like, what? And it's so sweet and so beautiful. And to also hear how yoga is all over the world 100%. And yoga is a little different all over the world. But yoga has that same root. Yes. It's still there, that intention to seek union, not just mind, body, and soul, but union to something cosmic and higher. Because even in, we'll say, Muslim countries or strongly Christian countries when religion can feel threatened by yoga, I had this yoga teacher say, it's not a competition. It's a complementary practice. So it's not competitive, it's complementary. And I love that phrasing because that is something that a lot of yoga teachers are doing, that work to educate their communities that this is not something that is at all meant to compete or take away. It's just meant to complement and add. So I think that also being sensitive to cultural differences and always being open, just saying, I have no place to judge and no interest in judging, and making sure that space feels safe for them to also share whatever's comfortable. I edit my podcast. Niall edits hers. This is a great practice because if someone is nervous and they say something wrong, the ability to say it again feels beautiful,
Yes.
and try again and come again and just try again, no
Yeah.
problem. And also the ability to not be live, to not have people asking, to not have too much pressure. I just think the more that we can just say, hey, it's just a human talking to a human.
Yeah.
And I am genuinely so fascinated and interested by you and your story. Like that translates, like that feels good.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what I've learned, is that the more that I can show them, yeah, I am really interested. My listeners are interested. We really want to hear your story. It is important. It is valuable. It is worthy. It is
Yes.
all these beautiful things. Like that's what I also want to
Yeah.
communicate and have every yoga teacher know their work is important. Their
Yes.
work is vital. And I just interviewed a yoga teacher in Afghanistan, and
Beautiful.
it really explains to me her story, how vital and important yoga is for a community, because
Mhm.
she started offering yoga to the women in Afghanistan, in Kabul, the city she was living in. And she was having to do it through very like word of mouth, very, we'll say, she kept on saying she couldn't have transparent marketing, quote unquote. So she couldn't
Mhm.
maybe call it yoga, or couldn't,
Mhm.
she had to kind of be roundabout. But after some time, she actually got a lot of threats, a lot of death threats, and then calls for her to be beheaded,
Mhm.
because the fundamentalists had discovered
Yeah.
that she was doing something that they considered against their faith. But she knew that these women need to come together and have a space to feel safe,
Yeah.
to move, to have a community. And this is a similar story to the yoga teacher in Sudan I interviewed, Natalie
Mhm.
Batar. There's so much trauma and violence and political upheaval and difficulties and
Yeah.
horrible. And for men and women in her community to come together and feel safe to even talk about it, to have
Mhm.
a physical safety to verbalize in a place where there is no we'll say there is really a range of what is freedom of speech, like I don't know how to say that better,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not safe. So then she was making a safe place for people to process.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just for practicing asana, but also the community coming together to process trauma
Yeah.
and difficulties and upheavals and catastrophes. And whoa,
Yeah. It's
whoa,
incredible.
that is what yoga does. That is
Yeah.
what meditation circles and people who are coming together
Yeah.
in spiritual ways, that's the gift it creates, is it changes your entire community. Everyone you touch, that can be
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more calm, a little less angry, a
Mhm.
little more a little more able to pause and choose the
Mhm.
reaction, that ripples.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I remember when I first learned of how, like, what you're giving off, so how you're feeling inside, how that can ripple. And I think it's incredible you mentioning it's the story of these building these community spaces through yoga, and then it just expands to allow for this mass amount of community healing and community discussion. So I did a project not too long ago. I was helping out this nonprofit with them building out a wellness component. And one of my biggest recommendations was, okay, yes, you guys can have the individual practices that you do when you, before, you're coming in. And then before you come to the office, and then you're coming into the office to be together, there's also importance in having that communal space where you guys can feel safe and having difficult conversations and trying to explore, different ways of doing things without feeling like you're going to be attacked by the policies of the job or whatever. And in your case, the politics, the upheavals that are going on in the actual country itself. So it's incredible to also be reminded that through these practices, yes, it is a you with yourself. So it's an individual journey, but it's also a community journey. And when we bring in that community aspect as we're going into our spiritual world, it's actually incredible, because just like how you have this, we talked about earlier, like this ancient wisdom that is deep within us, we give ourselves the space to listen, so does your neighbor, and so does your neighbor's neighbor, and your neighbor's neighbor's neighbor. And imagine all of you guys are coming together to learn, to practice, and to just like really connect with the root of existence, the root of your community, the root of everything. And like yoga is the medium. Like it's absolutely incredible. So that is incredible that you're able to, just really present so many global and transformational stories of people still continuing to practice these lifestyles, these tools, like you mentioned, that are complementary, even if their existing environment is against it, and yet they're still trying to help as many people as possible. So that's honestly peace warriors.
It is incredible, isn't it? I mean, the bravery. Yes,
Yes,
so
yes,
brave. And
yes.
there's, I mean, we can take it for granted. Like, oh, I can roll out my yoga mat in any park
Sure.
and no
Yep.
problem. Or I can walk
Mm-hmm.
down the street and find a yoga studio, no problem. There's people I've interviewed who there was not a single yoga teacher in their country. And
Wow.
they, like, they had to become that teacher,
Wow.
So it's just amazing that yoga isn't accessible, well, wasn't accessible everywhere. And I'd still say that I think, I mean, I hope my intention now is to interview one yoga teacher from every country around the world. And I hope that yoga teacher can be local, like a native to that
Yes.
country is my goal. But
Mm-hmm.
if someone has lived in a country for 20 years and had kids there, like who am I, or no kids, either
Yeah.
way, but who am I to say that if that person feels like they are from that country?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
You are. I mean, just because I have switched countries too, but I've never
Yeah.
felt like I'm French or Balinese or
True.
anything. So I also think we have to have space and acknowledge too that even though it's not your country of origin, it doesn't mean I'm going to deny that you are a representative or a part or a piece of that,
Yeah.
that community.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Again, I'm still like dumbfounded at this. I really love that this is what you do. And it is incredible. Like, I mean, like, imagine also, let's just say I'm here, or I'm in Washington, D.C., and I come across your platform and you have an interview and a practice from a yoga instructor from Vanuatu, for example, like a small Pacific Island nation.
Nicola Barnes, if anyone wants to say hi to her, she's the yoga teacher
Oh,
from
sweet.
there. Yep.
And it's like, and imagine that, like, I'm like, okay, I'm connecting with, you said her name, Nicola Barnes. I'm connecting with her. And I'm like, wow, I've never felt like I've connected with a yoga teacher this much before. And yet she's like halfway across the world. But you see, that's the power of what you're doing. You're really making these expansive connections. And yeah, just totally tooting your horn right now.
Yay, thank you for all the toots.
Oh man. And I do want to ask you another question here because it's something that's in the back of my mind. So I know the words, for example, right? So the word peace, the word self-care, balance, all these different things, right? They have a textbook definition. And my curious point always is how when we're on these wellness journeys, these spiritual wellness journeys, especially with this beautiful community aspect that you're bringing in, how have your definitions of, say, peace or self-care or balance or wellness, even, how do they follow a textbook definition, or have they continued to transform and evolve and perhaps even expand with time?
Now you got no clue. This is so cool because the one question I ask every single guest on my podcast, the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast, is what is your personal definition of yoga? I ask every person to define yoga for them because there is a textbook definition, there is the ancient one. So I love that question. Beautiful. And I would say that for me, on my path on this journey, I am trying as hard as I can to not lock things in, because when we have that one set definition, that one lock, usually things don't feel very spacious or roomy, do they? Like they don't feel like you can breathe into them and allow them to expand or contract or, be whatever they need to be. And so I think with words like peace and balance, like balance for me, what does balance mean in my life? Was that different than a few months ago when I wasn't in the US? Yeah. Balance now is so different. So allowing yourself the grace and the compassion that things change and definitions change and what things can be, need to be, that all shifts. And that's okay. And I love that answer too, that it will change multiple times. And the only thing that is guaranteed is change, as the Buddhists say.
Yeah.
I can't count on anything else but change. One truth. But I do love that because questioning your definitions, I think currently in your current space is also a beautiful practice for like journaling. Like, what does peace mean to me? Like, how do I create that? Like, why is that important? How can I honor it more? Like asking those questions, I think are beautiful. Do you want me to unpack anything else, Naya, or did I
I
do it okay?
love that. I thought it was really great because yeah, like even my own personal journey, I have redefined and redefined and redefined. And I really loved how you talked about how, for example, even in your own journaling practice, like let's just say, or goodwill, anything, I don't know, just anything, the purpose has come to mind and you're possibly questioning purpose. Like, what is my purpose? Like, am I doing it right? Like, is it meeting societal standards? Again, we're talking about being like, we're from the US. So we're coming from like, okay, we understand this US mindset, like, but also being travelers, we're also introduced to other ways of doing things, other perceptions, other mindsets, other ways of approaching work and productivity and stuff like that. So I would also agree with you that my mindset has expanded, and like, I don't have to drill myself into the ground in order to be successful, for example, or in order to feel like I have contributed or done anything, whatever the feeling is. And so one of my favorite questions that I often ask people is like, how do you define success for yourself? And that ranges per person for sure. But a lot of times it's like, oh, I've done X amount today. And it's like, okay. And that can be your definition. And maybe that's your definition for that day. What is it tomorrow or in a week or in a month? Are you flexible enough, as you mentioned, to allow that definition to transform as you yourself are constantly transforming? So yeah, I love how you unpack that, because I don't see any lies.
Totally. And I think that it is just important to breathe space, have space for it, to question these things, ask people questions, because I think that even we'll say relaxation. That was something my therapist asked me last week. How do you define relaxation? I was like, oh. And I was like, well, not being productive. She was like, so you have to be productive if in any other state and area, if you're, and I was like, oh no, like it was such a beautiful thing. And so asking people, ask your partner, ask your parent, if you're thinking about something, if something's not feeling right, overwhelm. How do you define stress? How do you define peace? How do you define growth? Just ask. It's a beautiful conversation, I think, that will unfold. And I'm looking forward to asking my partner, how does he define relaxation? Because we relax differently.
Of course. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, because I think at least in my own journey, a lot of times we can think that, okay, yeah, because the dictionary has told us, okay, this is what relaxation means, that thus all of us are operating on that spectrum of this is what it means. But of course, like you're saying, if you don't ask, you have no idea that possibly even like you mentioned, your mom, your partner, your next door neighbor, even if you were all brought up in the same, environment, the same society, same community, they could have blaringly different definitions for something that you would assume would be the same across the board. So that's a good point.
Yeah. I think that we all make a lot of assumptions, and it's also really convenient for ourselves to make assumptions. I don't want to say it's lazy, but our brain wants things to make sense, want people to make sense. And then we have this kind of idea of who a person is. We'll just give this person's name Nancy. Like, we just know who Nancy is. Like, I got a sense for her. I've known her. I've met her. I've talked to her. I've hung out, blah, blah, blah. But then when Nancy's like, oh, guess what? I'm going to dye my hair pink, get full arm sleeve tattoos. You're like, wait, Nancy, I knew you, Nancy, stop. It's like so uncomfortable for us when we're like, oh, they're not who I thought they were. Like, if people realize there's we have 1,000 different facets of ourselves. But when people see that a different facet, they're like, wait, you're really into that? Like, surprise, I sure am, and I love surprising people. Surprise.
It's like, I have so many skills you didn't know.
or weird habits that you don't even know, or mental perceptions. When I'm like, my mind's a little negative or judgmental. My mind, I would say, towards myself, pretty tough critic. And people are like, but you seem so. It's like, yeah. You think that's I seem something. So ask those questions, be curious, be open, be gentle, and have grace for other people and for yourself. I think the more we can practice self-compassion, passion for others, the better.
Yeah. And the more that we allow ourselves to be curious about these definitions, and also curious about allowing other people to exist in the multitudes that they exist in, and also allowing ourselves to exist in the multitudes in which we exist in, because
The
that's one
vast spectrum of availability.
I mean, because if you think about it, this vast network, for example, of yoga teachers, like, did they always feel like they were called to be yoga teachers, even for yourself? Like,
Yeah.
you allowed yourself to unfold, and you were like, yeah, this direction feels, and they're all, yep, this direction. Because the person's like, I don't, oh, yes. It's just like, it's like a ladder. It just increases. And I can imagine that some of the yoga teachers you've interviewed have also probably experienced similar things of, like, perhaps they didn't know that this was the calling at first, especially for the ones where they're the only yoga teacher in their country. Incredible way to really just, like, that's like a trailblazing action right there. Like, no one else is the yoga teacher but you. So that's wow.
Yep, it is. And then also, how does your community respond to that? Like in
Yes.
Mexico, when the yoga teacher Ana Paula Hernandez moved to this small town, people had never heard of yoga and they called her a bruja. They called her a witch because they had no clue what was going on. Or I interviewed this wonderful yoga teacher from Ethiopia, and she was saying how everyone, when they see her on the street, they say yoga, or if they can't quite remember it, they say something like yoga or like yaiga, like they'll just like shout things like yoga at her. And it was incredible that like she is the representation in her whole, I won't say whole country, I mean, but in her whole city, the capital city of Addis Ababa, she's a pillar in the whole community. And I mean, the whole city, it's not just a pillar in the wellness community, a pillar, the people on the street, all walks of life, point at her and shout yoga in a positive way, too. It's not a negative one, at least. So that's very lucky.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay. So I want to go ahead and give you a space to promote some of the ways that listeners can connect with you as a yoga teacher, you as a podcaster, you as a yogi connector. And of course, your links and everything will be in the show notes for this episode, but it's always beautiful to just say them out loud as well. I think that's great for folks who just want to go do it now.
Thank you, Naya. Yeah, so I'm at wildyogatribe.com. Podcast is Wild Yoga Tribe. It's on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening. Ask Alexa to play it. She'll do it. And then also on social media, anywhere you're hanging out on social media, I'll be there too. And if you are interested in like some private Zooms, some Q&As, like I have a Patreon. I also do offer private Zoom classes, and then really bespoke, very, unique to just what you need, holistic health and wellness coaching. So if you are working through something or you want to go more plant-based, I'm also a vegan nutritionist. There's different ways we can work together through yoga, meditation, energy healing, chakra, crystals. I'm with you to meet you where you are. So all that information and details will be at Wild Yoga Tribe. But you can send me a DM. I check everything myself. So I'm happy to chat.
Nice. The human checking all the human interactions. I say that in the age of AI.
There's a lot of bots out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's incredible. Thank you so much, Lilly, for being here on the Meditation Matters podcast. We're excited to know about how you've been really putting your foot forward to impact this space and wellness and yoga and beyond. Really, it's really incredible to have you here and to learn more about what you're doing. And I'm super excited to even have you back in the future to talk about more things and even to listen to your podcast to learn about all these yogis that you've been interviewing. So thank you.
Thank you, Naya. It's been such a joy to be with you.
Thank you for joining us today and listening to episode 4 of season 4 of the Meditation Matters podcast, where we featured Lilly and had a beautiful and bountiful discussion about the benefits of clearing the mind and calming the body, and to give us the opportunity to hear ourselves think, to feel the nudges of our internal world, of our spirit, of our soul calling us to go in directions that are aligning and most serving to us. I hope that you found this episode useful in some of the practices that we recommended, that you might be interested in trying them yourself the next time you find yourself in emotional deregulation or deep distraction, or just looking for answers that are hard to find outside of yourself. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever it is that you enjoy listening, whether or not that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Be sure to follow us so that you stay up to date on all of our future postings. And of course, be sure to sign up and become a member on our Patreon to join a more intimate community where we're able to explore all of these topics of spiritual wellness together in a very inclusive, welcoming, and open space as we continue to not only get to know ourselves and the benefits of these wellness practices and how they can push us forward in our spiritual wellness, but also how we can come together as a community to do this as one. Thanks for being here, and as always, let us continue to learn to live well on purpose together, each step at a time, each breath at a time, and each moment at a time. Until next time, much love, many blessings, and see you later.